I haven't done one of these in a while, but this is going to be a live episode of the Beginner to Master Speedrun, episode number 19. I posted number 18 just a few hours ago. I'm currently on a streak of 64 wins, a very interesting streak. Rating is 11-12, and let's get into it. First opponent playing Brad R. Cool. Let's play chess. Let's play e5. Oh, we have a Vienna. Okay, so I encountered the Vienna the last episode, and yeah, exactly this position I had the last episode. This is a Vienna Gambit. D5 is a very important move to know to counterattack the center. And the main line usually goes takes and then takes. This opponent is thinking, so maybe not used to encountering this move, D5. I mean, there are other possible captures for white. There's knight takes, pawn takes. If pawn takes, I'm likely to then take on f4. White doesn't take anything. White plays d3. So giving me the option to really choose which pawn I want to take. So this is the first point in the game. I'm on my own. Like I'm out of any sort of prior opening knowledge. The first move that comes to mind is pawn takes e4, but that would walk into pawn takes e5, then my knight's attacked, and then white's probably then ready to recapture. So yeah, interesting move, pawn d3. I don't think I've seen this one before. Can consider bishop g4, develop and attack the queen. Could play knight c6 to reinforce the center. There's also pawn takes pawn, which might walk into this move. I'm taking time here to try and figure out what to do. And d4 is another option, which then is likely met with knight e2. And then I can reinforce maybe knight c6. Yeah, I'm going to go for d4. I think this is probably one of the more solid, simple approaches. Like I gain space, make this knight move again. The position's probably fine for white, like after knight e2, but then white might have a clunky time on the king side, especially developing the bishop. Now I should note here that white could also consider counterattacking by taking on e5. And then if takes and then takes, it's a big trade. I can then activate the queen, most likely. But I'm very curious to check this opening after the game. Yeah, this does resemble a French type advanced variation, but usually in the French, it's like the pawn chain is facing the other direction. The pawn chain is pointed towards the king side. In this case, it's pointed towards the queen side. So yeah, let's continue developing knight c6, defending the pawn. Now, if white wants to, white could play pawn f5 and really just close down the center. And then we'll get a situation where the focus of play will likely shift to the wings. Like white would then maybe look to play on the king side. I'd look to play on the queen side. There's a general principle I think I gave a few episodes ago. Usually you want to focus on the side where your pawn chain is pointing towards. So it's more likely I'll try and focus on the queen side. Knight f3. Knight f3. Putting more pressure on the pawn. I probably have to take now. Bishop d6 is a move, but then the problem is after takes, d4 is a target. So let's go for this. And white has a choice whether to take back with knight or bishop. I'm imagining I'll probably develop this bishop here and this bishop to e6 or g4 and get some nice harmony in the center. Minor pieces will be decently placed. But, okay, white trying to disturb my harmony. Pawn e5. I mean, it would be really nice if I can just teleport my knight here. So the moves that come to mind are knight g4 and knight d5. Knight d5 allows white to take. I'm going to go for knight d5. There's a nice variation. If white takes on d4, I can take, and then queen h4. Meanwhile, I am threatening probably to play knight e3. I mean, white's probably best off recapturing on f4. Ooh, but I think white is falling for the trap now. And we see the downside of white moving the f pawn early and then leaving the king side a little bit neglected, because now queen h4. A few moves ago, I was not sure about the position, but now, yeah, I think white's gonna really be suffering. And there's 3 legal moves: g3, king e2, and king d2. King d2 might be the best try. I can play queen f2, attacking the knight and king. Also, there's bishop c5 first. Let's go for queen f2. Because, yeah, if the knight moves back, I'll have a pleasant choice. Either knight e3. Knight e3 is actually, I think, the easiest line to calculate because it almost traps a queen. It would force a queen here, and then I can take and then take here and fork once the king is driven to e1. I'm going to take a moment to look for better options, but yeah, let's just go for this. It wins material. It's not going to win the game right away, assuming white doesn't resign. But it will trade queens. It'll win the rook on a1. I'll simplify a little bit. So yeah, after this game, I'll analyze opening a little bit. Take a look at maybe what I should have done better. Also what white should have done better. White was probably fine, like, in the opening. Okay, got my fork. Yeah, it's definitely a position white can still try and play on. Like, my knight is perhaps likely to get trapped. Although I can start with this move, bishop to b4. I'm trying to drive the king away from covering c2. And now I have bishop g4. I'm developing my bishops to attack white's king. I like this move. With bishop e2, I'm happy to trade. And then, okay, if king takes, I can save the knight, which I'll do. I was going to say if knight takes, then I would castle queenside to attack the d-pawn. Ooh. White attacking this. c6 doesn't help because still knight c7. Bishop's also attacked, but it's defended by the knight. So, castle queenside to defend and to attack. Multi-purpose move. And yeah, really just the goal is to get the pieces into the game, especially both rooks. Induce some trades if possible. Like if takes, that'd be nice. And ideally, I want to start going after these center pawns. Those are on the half-won files. Okay, white probably missing the fact that bishop can move backwards. Not quite seeing the whole board there. So actually ended up being a pretty smooth game, at least once I got this queen h4 move in. And sometimes this is how you win at this rating level. You just follow principles, be patient, and wait for the opportunity to strike. My opponent kind of just walked into the tactical sequence. I mean, this looked like a safe move at first glance, but just didn't quite sense the danger. So going back in the opening, I'm really curious what I should have played in this position. Stockfish says that d4 is the second best move, but the best move is actually to take, which I was hesitant to do because this move looks scary. But in this position, there's a really key move. Not to move the knight, but to play... I'll give Twitch chat a chance to try and find it, or people watching in the future on YouTube. Black to move. Sometimes the best defense is attack. Yeah, good job to everyone saying d4. And what this does, it counterattacks the knight. It frees the square for this knight. So if this knight moves, let's say e4, I can move here, defending, preparing this. And then otherwise, if takes, I take. And I mean, black's up a pawn, ready to activate. It looks crazy, but this is just better for black. So yeah, white was doing fine here. Eval bar says like close to equal. e5 was maybe the first misstep, and then taking was a big misstep. Yeah, white should just take back here, and it would have been a fight. Bishop takes, maybe preferable. Okay, so that was game number one. One person was asking in Twitch chat, how does a knight move? Feel free to Google it. But let's move on to game number two of this episode. Playing GS Schutler from the USA. And playing e4. And for most of this speedrun series, I've been sticking with the same set of openings. At some point, I might mix things up. H6 is a move, usually indicates that black is scared of the potential knight g5. The problem with h6, it's a little bit slow to develop the king side. Gives me time to strike in the center. Yeah, maybe we can call this the anti-fried liver. But yeah, black playing really quickly. Pawn c5, attacking the queen. I'm going to take a moment here because there's a few options for the queen. Like check or this. I mean, this would threaten mate. A few ways to make threats. I don't think these moves are so useful though. Like queen here, it's just asking for black to defend and then probably to attack. So I'm a bit more inclined to maybe play a move like queen d3. Just a nice looking square. Queen d2 would block the bishop. Queen d1 look passive. Black playing very quickly here. Now, one point I want to make is that when black plays c5, this pawn can't move backwards. So this square is going to be a probably key square for the knight. If I move here right away, then we trade. But the eventual prospect of knight d5 would be nice. Here I'm actually thinking knight b5 to just threaten the fork. And black could take the pawn, but I would get in knight c7. And sometimes, like, when you're considering a move like this, the opponent will have an easy defense. But in this case, I don't see an easy defense for black. Like the queen's not on d8, and it's kind of far away from helping out. And king d8, now black has lost castling rights. But this move does, I guess, defend. And now black is attacking e4. f3 is not legal because I'm pinned. So, yeah, kind of a weird spot. e5 looks really nice. e5. I might allow the queen trade though. Like queen e4 would be possible there. And especially with black losing castling rights, I don't want to allow black to trade queens so easily. So what I'm going to do here is just move back to c3. I think the knight served its purpose, provoking the king to move. And now it's just more useful in defending the pawn again. And now, yeah, I'd like to develop. I really want to play bishop f4, but queen takes f4. So I'll start with g3. Attacking the queen. It does allow this, but the plan would be to play bishop f4 and get some attack against d6. I was also going to say that it's very likely that castling queenside will come eventually, although I can't legally castle here because the queen controls d1. King d7. Black again defending with the king. There's a really attractive move here, which, yeah, generally when you're applying pressure, I mean, obviously d6 is a focal point. You just want to add more attackers. Rook d1 is one option. Knight b5 is an option to move back. But I think e5 is just the most devastating for black. Attacking the knight, attacking the pawn. Pawn is pinned. I'm preserving bishop b5, which I think I'll go for in this position. There was a question, I'll maybe try and answer this after the game, but why I wasn't taking on f7. The short answer is there were more juicier targets to pursue. But I probably could have gone away with taking and would have been fine. Okay, so now I can go for pawn takes pawn or knight d5. Let's go for pawn takes pawn. King f6, okay. It's very, very close to checkmate. I think it's checkmate in 2. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is force mate in 2. I'm already controlling a lot of squares around the king. e6 is the one square that's not controlled. But the natural continuation here is knight d5, forcing the king to e6. And then there should be checkmate in 1. Yeah, queen to e4. Nice kind of aesthetic mate. King got a little bit exploitable early on in this game. Yeah, in the final position, a lot of the pieces are playing a role in the mates. Bishop, both bishops, the knight, the queen. Pawn is nice having on d6. Anyway, this game was a nice example of kind of how to punish a slow opening from black. Like h6 is surprisingly common at this rating level. I think partly because a lot of players struggle with this fried liver type line, like knight g5, etc. So usually what I recommend for players that are scared of the early knight g5 is you can start with bishop c5, and then the queen controls g5 if white plays this. Then you can play this, and then knight g5 is met with castling. But what happened this game was, yeah, I opened the center, got the early lead in development. Black just had the queen out early. And then, yeah, so here, there are a few moments where I could have taken the pawn. If I take it here, then queen takes e4. And this is not what I want. Like with the queen trade, then black is coping a bit more easily. So I move back to just avoid trading queens. And then here, yeah, I guess I could have taken... I'll be honest, I didn't even consider it. Like sometimes early on, you just want to focus on piece activity and development more than material, especially if the material isn't that valuable. So with G3, yeah, I was really just going for quick initiative, like attack the queen, develop the bishop to attack the pawn, and that led to just a quicker way to win the game. So hopefully everything makes sense. Another smooth game. Question from Lightfullet. Can you please explain knight b5, knight takes e4, and then knight c7? Ah, okay, that's actually a good point. Black could have considered taking. And then, okay, it's not a good move, and we'll go through why, but it's tricky because black is threatening f2 here. If I play this, then king d8, and then, yeah, it's risky to take the rook because then I'm subjecting myself to queen takes f2. I think g3 is actually a nice way to solve the problems, like attack the queen and then just get ready to take the rook the next move. And there's just too many targets in the position. So g3 is a nice kind of in-between move, ensuring that I'm not losing f2. So let's move on. 2 games in. Let's do another. Playing line on the left. e4. Sticking with principled openings. Playing knight c6. And we have a Spanish. I've encountered the Spanish a few times in this series. And I'm going to go for the, not the main line. This is called the Steinitz defense, pawn d6. And one of the reasons I go for this, partly is because I learned this when I was younger. It was one of the first openings I learned against the Spanish. But there's also a really nice trap that can emerge from this exact position. And d4, of course, looked attractive for white. Now, white's not falling into the trap. The trap usually occurs after bishop b3, and I can explain after the game. With d5, white is counterattacking. And now it's interesting, because I have to choose whether to save the knight and allow white to save the bishop, or take the bishop and then go into some weird situation where I'll have double pawns, but white will have this pawn on c6. I'm going to take the bishop. Even though these pawns look really ugly, the prospect of just winning the c-pawn, I think, is enough to go for this. And the idea is, yeah, if bishop g5, then I'll hopefully be able to get out of the pin. I was going to say if c3, I would take, and then bishop d7. So here, I mean, generally you should be very, very careful playing a move like f6, because it can very often weaken the king. In this case, I think it's justified to simply break the pin, attack the bishop, and then next move, take the pawn. And another point I wanted to make, like another reason why I went for this trade of bishop for knight, is that long term, I have the 2 bishops, which, at least from my observations, like stronger players usually put more favor towards having the bishop pair. And it can definitely make a difference later in the game. So going forward from here, let's develop. Play bishop g4. I'm pinning the knight. Queen d5, it looks scary, but I can probably respond with queen d7. White is maybe going to win the pawn back. Like already here, I can start applying pressure. Go for knight d4, attacking the pinned knight. And the strategy might be to like just focus on a quick kingside attack. Like when the time is right, take with one of the pieces on f3, damage white structure, and then try and get the queen in. Like if I can somehow get the queen to the g file or to h3, then maybe there will be mating ideas. So here, yeah, this is a very common mistake. White's trying to maybe force matters on the king side, make my bishop decide what to do. But in playing h3, this pawn is overworked. And I can take, and after takes back, I can take on h3. And I'll win a pawn and just open the king in the process. And because this comes with check, yeah, white can't take the bishop. So now I'm actually up 2 pawns. White still hasn't won this pawn back. It's not a pawn I really care about. But it's still a question like how to actually formulate a plan on the king side. Of course, I'd love to teleport my queen to g2, but life isn't that easy. Even if I teleport to g6, there's bishop here. I mean, g5 comes to mind. g5, bishop g3, h5 is definitely one approach. I might just have to be patient here. Kind of accept the fact that I won't be mating so soon. My king is relatively safe in the center for the time being, so I'm not in so much rush to castle. Although there is kind of an interesting plan of playing bishop e7 and then f5, offer the bishop trade, and then maybe I can more easily get the queen in. But I don't want to be in the spot like bishop here and then queen d5. I guess then rook b8. I also don't want to overthink things. So I think I will play this move. I'm trying to be somewhat efficient with development. Also identifying that this bishop is my worst piece because all my pawns in the center are on dark squares. So if I can get an f5 and trade it off, it would make life a bit easier. Yeah, white preserving the bishop. Thinking I might as well throw in this move. Like not even giving white a chance to take on a4. Queen is useful here. Okay, white quickly plays knight d5. Now, I don't want to play a brain-dead move like c6 because this would walk into knight b6. I think I'll just move back. I'll focus in the center, bishop e6. Super solid here. And maybe gradually prepare like rook b8 and then c6. Okay, white takes. So I'm actually very, very happy to trade off that really bad bishop for white's like pretty active knight. I'm not sure what king f1 intends to do. Maybe running the king to the center. I'm going to start pushing. Pawn h5. Going for pawn h4. Bishop h4 does prevent pawn h4, but ironically, it's going to still allow pawn h4, and h4 comes with tempo, so white's losing a bit of time. This bishop is basically a dead piece because it's completely restricted. Even moving to g1 is blocked by its pawn. And now here, I'm actually debating. Like I have a couple bishop checks, bishop h3 or bishop c4. And because I'm not sure which bishop move to play, I'm just going to hold off. I know my rook likes to be on open file. This is one of the pluses of having double pawns. It does open up the line for the rook. And maybe later where it's more clear, I'll have a better idea where the bishop wants to go. Also have to watch my time. Sometimes the downside of doing these speed runs is I take a lot of time explaining every move and then get a little bit low on time. So, and still about 4 minutes. Oops. To make sure I don't mess up the layout too. Opponent taking time here. Plays pawn to b3, which does save the pawn. Also prevents bishop c4. I don't really want to take and allow the file to open for white. I'm going to play queen d7. Like, it moved to e7 to recapture, but I think it's just better on the square because it also has potential to use these diagonals. And one plan might be to play this g4 move. To get rid of this pawn, to open the g file, maybe put the rook on g8. Okay, rook e3. I'm going to start with rook g8. It's kind of like the calm before the storm. I'm just trying to optimize the pieces to get ready for the eventual pawn break. Like sometimes before you try and open the position, you just want to make sure all the pieces are on their optimal squares. And rooks either like to be on open files or files which are likely to open. And because I control the like when I go for this break, then I can control when the file opens. I mean, the king's going to have a safe place. If it wants to move to e2, it's somewhat hard to exploit. I guess another thing I should point out is it's so nice having all my pawns, at least all these pawns on dark squares, because it complements my bishop, so I'm maximizing the number of squares I'm controlling, and I'm restricting white's bishop. So like generally when there's opposite color bishops, you do want to be conscientious of where you put your pawns, or what color you put your pawns on. Going for this move, just defending a6, exerting pressure against c2. If takes, I would have the pin, bishop c4. Oh, and here, wow, white's walking into a double pin, bishop c4 anyway. It's actually a really aesthetic move. This pin and this pin. Did not see that coming up until white had already played rook b1. But very feel-good move. So if white takes on c4 with the queen, I'll take, and then go up material. I'm basically winning a rook for a bishop regardless. Yeah, and we'll simplify into the endgame. I haven't lost a single pawn yet. Still have all 8 pawns. White maybe wants to go for this. But now I can trap the bishop. Yeah, the rook has snuck in from behind. And once I win the bishop, then it should be pretty straightforward to queen the pawn. Unless the bishop moves here, then I guess I'm losing my first pawn of the game. But now the other rook is ready to come in. King's going to run. So I do want to be efficient with the conversion here. No way for white to defend a2. I mean, the goal is probably to win a2 and then look to queen this pawn. There also might be some mating ideas with the other rook coming in. Yeah, Yeah, if I get both rooks in the second rank, they can start to coordinate. White's still trying to fight. I mean, trying to make sure I can't easily queen, but yeah, now c2 is going to be the next victim. And once the rooks get connected, I think there's bound to be some mating ideas. Like here, I'll take with the A rook, and I'm threatening mate in 1. Don't have to worry about any stalemate. I mean, white has a lot of legal moves. And this is checkmate. Okay. Pretty smooth game. I see a comment about rook a3. There are a lot of ways to win. Rook a3 runs into c3, so I think rook c2 is a bit more efficient. But yeah, that was a kind of a nice strategic positional battle. I think I got the early edge out of the opening. If we just go back, I feel like I've shown this line at least a few times across the various speedrun episodes. But for anyone that missed it or hasn't seen this line before, d4 is arguably a small mistake for white. I mean, a lot of players will stumble into this thinking it looks good, the knight's pinned, d5 is a threat, pawn takes pawn is a threat, if takes and takes. But a lot of players will stumble into this line with b5. My opponent played d5, which I think is one of the best moves. But if bishop b3, then this sequence is the Noah's Ark trap. If white takes here, which is like the big blunder, then there's c5, queen d5. Looks like maybe black's in trouble, but bishop e6, defending mate and defending the rook. Queen c6, bishop d7, queen goes back, and then c4. And then black is winning a piece. So I've had this position a good amount, or this trap a good amount over the course of my early chess career. And what happened in the game, I think, was in just kind of a different path in this opening. I won the pawn, I exerted pressure, I won another pawn, and this bishop was kind of dead for most of the game. But it still took patience to kind of build up the advantage. So I'm scanning through chat, trying to look for questions. There's a question from Jimster. Could someone explain what overworked means? Yeah, it's a very common concept in chess. Overworked simply refers to, it's usually a piece that's doing a few too many jobs in the position. Usually a piece that's defending too many things in the position. In this case, the pawn was defending h3 and f3. And the typical way to take advantage of an overworked piece is to take one thing, make the g2 pawn do its job on f3, and then win the other thing on h3. And you see this not only with pawns being overworked, but any piece can be overworked. And sometimes, like before you even see a tactic, you'll just identify that something is overworked, and that will lead you to spotting the tactic. So I hope that makes sense. Anyway, I think I'm going to wrap it up here for this episode. I hope people enjoyed watching on Twitch. Hope you guys learned a thing or two. I guess I can show Twitch chat for future YouTube audience. Thank you, Chess Master, the last minute bits. Yeah, if you're watching in the future on YouTube, don't forget to follow on Twitch. I sometimes will live stream these episodes, do a lot of other live content as well. Maybe someday, hopefully sometime this year, I'll experiment with streaming on YouTube as well. Just gotta look into technical setup. And yeah, a lot of energy. I appreciate people being awake. Maybe there's some people who have fallen asleep at this point, but stay tuned for more.